I used to believe that a man could tell when his wife was lying to him. That the years spent together, the shared bed, whispered promises, the weight of trust, would make deceit impossible. But I was wrong. Sandra was a master at deception. And I was the fool who thought love meant safety. It started with the small things, the kind that seem insignificant until you line them up like dominoes. A shift in her perfume, something new, something floral when she had always preferred musk. Unanswered texts that used to get replies in minutes. Late nights at work that stretched longer, the excuses always delivered with that perfect mix of exasperation and justification. "I swear, Damon, it's just this campaign," she had sighed one night, rolling onto her side, her back to me. "Once it's wrapped up, things will go back to normal." Normal. That word tasted bitter now. Sandra was an advertising executive, her job demanding but never unpredictable. I knew her schedule better than she did. Yet suddenly, she had client dinners every other night, weekend strategy retreats, emergency meetings that always ended past midnight. I played along, like an idiot. I kissed her goodbye at the door, told her to be safe, acted as if I believed her. I didn't. The first real clue, the kind I couldn't ignore, came on a Thursday. I had the day off, a rare break from my security consulting firm. I decided to surprise her at work, take her out for lunch, something spontaneous, something we hadn't done in too long. I called ahead. Her assistant, a bubbly girl named Lexi, picked up. "Oh, she's not here," she said, hesitant. I frowned. "Not there?" "She told me she had a big meeting today." There was a pause. A too long pause. Yeah. I think she might have gone off-site?" *T. I drove to her office anyway, my stomach a knot of suspicion and anger. I parked across the street and waited. 2 hours passed before I saw her step out. Her hair was different, loose waves instead of the tight bun she wore for work. She wasn't dressed for the office. Instead, she had on a short, flirty dress I hadn't seen before, red and hugging her curves. The kind of dress you wear for someone who isn't your husband. And she wasn't alone. The man beside her was tall, broad-shouldered, with the relaxed confidence of someone who knew he could have whatever he wanted. His hand lingered on the small of Sandra's back as they walked to his car, a sleek black Mercedes. I sat frozen as they drove off. For hours, I stared at my phone, at our old texts, at the photos of us smiling at the beach, at our wedding picture hanging in the hallway. My hands clenched into fists as realization crashed over me. She was cheating on me. And I was going to make her pay. I didn't confront Sandra that night. Confrontation was for fools, the kind of men who begged, who screamed, who let their emotions cloud their judgment. I wasn't that man. Instead, I played the part of the oblivious husband. I cooked dinner, poured her wine, watched her as she pretended nothing had changed. And she played her role beautifully. "Long day?" I asked, watching her peel off her blazer, revealing the slim black tank top underneath. She sighed dramatically, rubbing her temples. "Exhausting. Meetings ran over, and Lexi was useless as usual. I swear I'm drowning in work." She was good. So good I might have believed her if I hadn't seen her slipping into that Mercedes with another man's hand on her waist. I smiled. "I was thinking of surprising you for lunch today. Thought maybe we could catch up, just the two of us." Sandra froze. Just for a second. A flicker of hesitation, a micro-expression most people wouldn't notice. But I did. Then she laughed. "Ah, babe, that would have been nice. But I barely had time to breathe, let alone eat." She walked over, pressing her lips to my cheek. "Let me make it up to you this weekend. Dinner, just us?" I nodded, gripping her waist, pulling her into me. She smelled like vanilla and something else. Something unfamiliar. Something not mine. That night, ********************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************* remind myself what was mine. My hands gripped her throat as I pounded into her, forcing her to moan my name. Her nails clawed my back, her breathless gasps filling the bedroom. Jesus, Damon, what's gotten into you? she whispered afterward, her body draped across mine, skin damp with sweat. I kissed her forehead, my lips brushing against her hair. Just missed you, that's all. She curled into me, her breathing slowing. Minutes later she was asleep. And I lay there, staring at the ceiling, knowing that the woman in my arms was lying to me. Knowing that soon she'd have no idea what was coming for her. The morning after, Sandra was glowing. The way she stretched, the way she hummed softly as she moved around the kitchen, it was the satisfaction of a woman who believed she had everything under control. She kissed me before leaving for work, her lips warm and sweet against mine. Don't wait up tonight, she said, grabbing her keys. More meetings, and the team wants to grab drinks after. You know how it is. I did. I knew she wouldn't be at any meetings. I knew she wouldn't be drinking with her team. And I sure as hell knew she wouldn't be coming home smelling like whiskey and frustration. I followed her. Sandra had always underestimated me. She thought she was smarter, thought I was blind. She had no idea that the man she had been deceiving was trained to read people, to anticipate their moves, to recognize patterns. For 15 years, I had built my career on security. I protected businesses, high-profile executives, even politicians. I had installed surveillance systems, analyzed human behavior, tracked threats before they could become real. Now, I was using those same skills on my wife. I kept my distance, trailing 2 cars behind as she drove across town. She never even looked in her rearview mirror, too comfortable in her lie. Her destination? A luxury high-rise in the city. I parked half a block away and watched as she walked into the lobby like she belonged there. The doorman greeted her with familiarity, tipping his hat before holding the door open. So this wasn't a first-time thing. She had been here before. Many times. I waited. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Then 2. I imagined her inside, stripping for him, letting him spread her legs, moaning the way she had moaned for me just last night. That was the part that burned the most. Not the betrayal. Not even the sex. It was that she came home and let me have her too. That she let me put my hands on her, let me kiss her, let me whisper how much I loved her, while she carried the scent of another man on her skin. And she thought I'd never find out. At 9:42 p.m., she walked out of the building, her dress slightly wrinkled, her hair a little less perfect than it had been that morning. She checked her reflection in her phone screen, fixing her lipstick before heading back to her car. Back to me. I let her go. For now I didn't sleep that night. Sandra curled up beside me, her body warm and soft against mine, her breathing steady, peaceful. She had no idea I had followed her. No idea I had watched her walk into another man's apartment, and emerge hours later, looking well ***ked and content. I lay still, my mind a storm of thoughts. Confronting her now would be pointless. She'd deny it. She'd lie. Maybe she'd cry, play the role of the wrongfully accused wife, gaslight me into questioning everything. No. That wasn't how this would play out. I wasn't some desperate husband begging for the truth. I was going to make her suffer. In the morning, I did what I always did. I played my part. She kissed me goodbye like nothing had changed. God, I barely got any sleep. She yawned, stretching. I smirked. Yeah, I wonder why. Late night? I asked, sipping my coffee. Sandra rolled her eyes dramatically. You have no idea. I swear, work is going to kill me. Work. She actually had the audacity to lie to my face. I'll make it up to you tonight, she added, running her fingers through my hair. Maybe we can go out. Just us? My teeth clenched. She still wanted to keep me close, still wanted the illusion of our happy marriage. That was the part that disgusted me the most. It wasn't enough for her to cheat, she wanted to keep me as the loyal, devoted husband while she spread her legs for another man. I kissed her forehead. That sounds perfect. She left for work, and I gave her a head start before following again. This time, I was prepared. I had installed tracking software on her phone while she was in the shower. It was subtle, undetectable, something I'd used in high-security jobs before. It let me see her location, access her messages, even listen through her microphone if I wanted to. She drove straight to him. Not even a fake stop at the office first. Just straight to the high-rise where her lover was waiting. This was routine for them. I clenched my fists as I parked down the street, watching her disappear into the building. I could have stormed in right then. Kicked down the door, broken his F***king face. But no, that was too easy. Too quick. I wanted her to feel trapped. To know that I knew. I scrolled through my phone, pulling up her messages. She had been careful. No saved texts, no names that stood out. But the tracking software could retrieve deleted messages. And there it was. I can still taste you on my lips. I wish I didn't have to go home tonight. It took everything in me not to crush my phone in my hands. I scrolled further. He doesn't suspect anything. I've kid him last night just to be sure. I needed to throw him off, you know? Sandra. My wife. She was making sure I didn't doubt her. She was playing me so F***ing perfectly, keeping me satisfied just enough so I wouldn't start asking questions. I gritted my teeth, breathing hard. My fingers hovered over the dial pad. I could call her. I could call him. But I wouldn't. I wanted to play this game a little longer. I wanted to watch her squirm. Sandra came home late that night. I was sitting in the dimly lit living room, pretending to read a book, but my mind was elsewhere. It had been hours since I watched her disappear into that high-rise, and now she was finally back, walking through the front door like nothing had happened. She tossed her purse onto the counter and slipped off her heels, stretching with an exhausted sigh. "You're still up?" she asked, running a hand through her hair. I gave her a small smile. "Couldn't sleep." She walked over, leaned down, and pressed her lips to mine. The scent of expensive perfume and a man's cologne clung to her skin. She had freshened up before coming home, but not well enough. I could still smell him on her. I forced myself to kiss her back, slow and deep. She melted into it, sighing against my lips, her fingers curling around the back of my neck. Maybe she thought she was winning. Maybe she thought she had me wrapped around her finger, still playing the role of the loving wife. But I wasn't blind anymore. Her body was still warm from wherever she had been, but her heart had turned cold long before tonight. "Long day?" I asked as she pulled away. She gave me a tired smile. "Exhausting. Meetings ran late, and then Lisa insisted we go for drinks. I swear, that woman never gets tired." Lisa. A convenient scapegoat, always available to take the blame when Sandra needed an alibi. I nodded as if I believed her. "You should get some rest." She smiled, stretching her arms over her head. Yeah? But maybe a shower first." "I smell like a bar." No, she didn't. She smelled like a hotel room. She disappeared into the bathroom, and I sat there, staring at my phone, forcing my breathing to stay steady. I had already seen the messages. The ones she thought she had deleted. "I can't stop thinking about earlier. The way you touched me, the way you..." I had stopped reading after that. I didn't need the details. I already knew what they meant. I clenched my jaw and closed my eyes. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just a mistake. This was deliberate. Calculated. A game she thought she was playing alone. But I was in it now. And I wasn't going to lose. The next morning, Sandra was the picture of perfection. She kissed me goodbye, smiled like a devoted wife, and left for work. I tracked her phone as soon as she pulled out of the driveway. She drove across town, straight to him, just like before. No hesitation, no guilt. I watched from a distance, my stomach twisting as she disappeared into his building. Then I made my move. I parked a block away and walked to a nearby cafe, where I pulled out my laptop. The tracking software I installed on her phone had already given me access to her location, her messages, and even her call logs. But I needed more. I needed to see them. My fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard, breaching the building's security system with ease. It wasn't a top-tier setup, nothing I hadn't dealt with before. Within minutes, I had access to the lobby's security feed. And there she was. Sandra, stepping into the elevator with him. Her body language relaxed, at ease. No nervous glances, no hesitation. She wasn't afraid of getting caught. She knew I wouldn't be looking. Or so she thought. I watched as the elevator doors closed, sealing them inside. I switched feeds, searching for their floor. Most residential buildings had some level of camera coverage, but people often overlooked private security risks. A glance at the blueprints told me what I needed to know: hallway cameras. I found them just as they stepped out of the elevator. Sandra laughed at something he said, her hand brushing against his arm. He leaned in, murmuring something against her ear, and she smirked. They moved down the hall, his hand finding the small of her back, guiding her inside his apartment. The door closed. I shut my laptop, my pulse steady despite the storm inside me. This wasn't a one-time thing. This wasn't some fleeting mistake she would regret. This was a relationship. One she had built behind my back. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. The anger, the betrayal, the gut-wrenching feeling of watching my wife walk into another man's home, it burned through me, but I didn't let it consume me. I wasn't some heartbroken husband drowning in self-pity. No. I was calculating. Planning. Because if she wanted to play games, I was going to show her what losing really felt like. Sandra had no idea she was already losing. That was the beauty of it. She thought she was in control, thought she was maneuvering through this affair like a seasoned liar. She thought she had me fooled, wrapped around her finger while she indulged herself with another man. But she was blind. And soon I was going to make sure she felt it. I didn't go home right away that day. Instead, I sat at the cafe, sipping on black coffee, going through everything I had gathered. It wasn't just about proving the affair anymore. I had passed that stage. I knew she was cheating. Now, it was about dismantling the life she thought was so perfectly built. Her messages told me plenty. She wasn't just having a fling, she was emotionally invested. I can't stop thinking about last night. Every time I close my eyes, I remember how you made me feel. He barely notices me anymore. I feel like I'm just there, like a ghost in my own home. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. I wish things were different. I exhaled slowly, my grip tightening around my coffee cup. Different? She wished things were different. She had everything. I had given her everything. And yet, that wasn't enough. That's the part that burned the most, not just that she betrayed me, but that she rewrote history to justify it. In her mind, I was already a failure, already the distant husband, the inattentive man who had lost her long before this ever started. She was painting herself as the victim. As if she hadn't spent last night in my bed, gasping my name, clawing at my back as I took what was mine. As if she hadn't kissed me goodbye this morning with the same lips she used to whisper her love to another man. I forced myself to breathe. I wouldn't let rage dictate my next move. No, this had to be slow. Thoughtful. Every step needed to hurt. And for that, I needed patience. I waited until Sandra was inside his apartment for over an hour before I made my move. I got out of my car, stretched my arms as if I had all the time in the world, then casually walked toward the high-rise entrance. The doorman barely glanced at me. This was an expensive building, but money didn't necessarily buy tight security, just the illusion of it. I walked past the front desk with confidence. No one questioned me. People never do when you look like you belong. In the elevator, I checked the text again. Leaving at 4. I'll call you later. Good. That meant I had time. I stepped out onto their floor, walking calmly down the hall. I already knew which unit was his. I had memorized the camera angles, studied the blueprints of the building. No doorbell cameras. No extra security. This was almost too easy. I stood outside his apartment door for a moment, listening. Faint laughter. A soft moan. The sound of wine glasses clinking. I could feel the heat rise in my chest, that primal instinct screaming at me to kick down the door and destroy everything inside. But no. Not yet. Instead, I reached into my pocket, pulling out a tiny black device no bigger than a fingernail. A listening bug, military grade, something I had used in past security jobs. I knelt, pressing it gently against the bottom of the door frame, right near the carpet where it would be invisible. Then I walked away. By the time Sandra got home that evening, I had already listened to over 2 hours of her affair unfolding in real time. The flirting. The laughter. The way she moaned his name. The way she talked about me. "He's been different lately," Sandra had said, voice breathy from whatever he was doing to her. "I think he suspects something." "Does it matter?" The man, Nathan, his name was Nathan, replied lazily. Sandra had sighed. I don't want to hurt him." "Not really." "Not really." That was rich. Now, she walked into our home like she wasn't carrying a storm inside her. She kissed me on the cheek like she always did, sighing as she dropped her bag onto the counter. "Tired?" I asked, watching her closely. "Exhausted," she murmured, stretching her arms above her head. "Work was brutal today." I nodded. "Want some wine?" She smiled. "That would be nice." I poured her a glass, watching as she took a slow sip, her eyes fluttering shut in appreciation. She had no idea I had been listening to her tell another man that she loved him. That she wanted to be with him. That she didn't know how much longer she could keep pretending. I almost laughed. "Pretending? Oh, sweetheart. You have no idea. That night, I made love to her slowly, deliberately. I wanted to feel her, to mark her, to remind myself of what she had thrown away." She responded eagerly, desperately, like she was trying to prove something to herself. Her body trembled beneath me, her nails digging into my back. I watched her face as she gasped my name, as pleasure twisted her features. For a moment, I almost believed it was real. But then I remembered. I remembered the way she had said his name earlier. I remembered the way she had told him she missed him. I remembered the way she had whispered "I love you" to him with the same lips she was using to kiss me. And suddenly, every movement felt like a lie. She shuddered in my arms, pressing herself against me, her breath warm against my skin. "God, Damon," she whispered, still catching her breath. "I love you." I smiled. "Me too," I whispered back. And I did love her. But love wasn't going to save her. Not anymore. Sandra had no idea she was sleeping next to a man who had already made up his mind. That night, as she curled into me, her breath warm against my chest, I stared at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of our home. Everything around us was normal. Our bed, our walls, the soft creak of the house settling. But beneath the surface, everything had already begun to collapse. She thought she was getting away with it. She thought she was in control. She thought she still had time. But her time had already run out. The next morning, Sandra went about her routine as if nothing had changed. She kissed me lazily before getting out of bed, stretching like a satisfied cat. I watched her slip into her robe, padding into the bathroom with a casual ease that made my stomach tighten. She had woken up in my bed, but I knew exactly whose touch still lingered on her skin. I followed her into the kitchen a few minutes later, watching as she poured coffee, scrolling through her phone like it was just another ordinary day. "You're up early," she said, not looking up. "Couldn't sleep," I murmured, watching her carefully. She glanced at me then, her expression unreadable. "Everything okay?" I smiled. "Yeah, just thinking about some work stuff." She accepted that answer easily, too easily. She had no idea what was really on my mind. She had no idea that, even now, I was tracking her phone, that I was listening to every call she made. She had no idea that, while she slept, I had been watching the security feed I'd hacked from Nathan's building, watching her step into his arms, watching her laugh like she hadn't laughed with me in years. She had no idea that I had already started dismantling the life she thought she had secured. I decided to push her. To see how deep her lies could go. "You busy tonight?" I asked casually, sipping my coffee. Sandra blinked, caught off guard. Tonight? Yeah. Thought maybe we could have dinner together. It's been a while since we had a night out, just us. Her fingers tightened around her mug. A flicker of hesitation. A careful pause before she smiled. That sounds nice. It was a lie. I knew it before she even finished speaking. She already had plans. She would agree to dinner now, but by noon, something would come up. Work. A friend. A last-minute crisis. She would cancel, promising to make it up to me, then slip into another man's bed before the night was over. I nodded. Great. I'll make reservations. She smiled and leaned in, kissing me gently. It almost fooled me. Almost thought I left the house before she did, but I didn't go to work. Instead, I parked 3 blocks away and waited. At exactly 10:37 a.m., Sandra got into her car and drove, not to work, but straight to Nathan's building. I followed at a distance, taking my time, letting her believe she was untouchable. She parked in the underground garage, taking the private elevator up. I already knew the code. She had given it to him 2 weeks ago, right after she started spending the night there. I knew because I had watched her do it. I had expected their affair to be discreet. It wasn't. Nathan's apartment was on the 15th floor, and the moment Sandra walked in, she practically melted into him. I watched through the security feed I had tapped, my stomach turning as he pulled her in, kissed her the way I used to. You're early, he murmured, running his hands down her back. Sandra giggled, tilting her head up to kiss him again. I couldn't wait. My jaw clenched. She was bold. Comfortable. This wasn't new. This wasn't the hesitation of a woman who felt guilty. She had been doing this for a long time. Nathan poured them both a drink, and they sat on the couch, talking, laughing, touching. It was nauseating how easy it was for her. Like she had never once belonged to me. I turned off the feed, my pulse steady despite the rage burning underneath my skin. I had seen enough. Now, it was time for her to see. I waited until she left Nathan's place in the afternoon, humming to herself as she drove home. She would come through the door smiling, pretend she had been at work all day. She would kiss me, maybe even shower, as if that would wash away her betrayal. But tonight, I was going to change the script. I set the stage carefully. By the time she walked through the door, the table was already set, candles flickering, soft music playing in the background. She blinked, surprised. Wow! You went all out. I smiled. Told you I wanted a nice dinner. She hesitated, just for a second. I was actually going to tell you. I know, I interrupted smoothly. You got caught up at work. Sandra stilled, eyes flickering to mine. She didn't realize it, but I had just taken my first step. Now, she was the one second-guessing me. She smiled, brushing it off. Yeah. I was going to call, but... It's fine, I said, leading her to the table. You're here now. She relaxed again, sipping her wine, oblivious to the fact that her perfect world was already beginning to crumble. Dinner was perfect. I made her favorite meal. I listened to her talk, nodding in all the right places. I made her laugh, touched her hand, kept her close. She had no idea that, under the table, my phone was open, a text thread pulled up. A text from Nathan. I had cloned her number days ago. I typed slowly, deliberately. I can't stop thinking about earlier. Wish I could come back. Sandra's phone buzzed in her lap. She glanced at it, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she set her fork down. Her fingers curled around the phone, unlocking it. I watched her eyes scan the message, watched the color drain from her face. She thought she was so careful. But now she was trapped. She had no idea I was the one who sent it. The beginning of the end. I sipped my wine, pretending not to notice her sudden tension. Something wrong? I asked innocently. Sandra hesitated. Then, she forced a smile. No. Just a work thing. A work thing. I nearly laughed. She thought she still had control. She had no idea she was already unraveling. And by the time I was done, she wouldn't have anything left. Sandra sat across from me, phone in her lap, fingers curled around it so tightly I thought she might crack the screen. I watched her carefully, studying every flicker of emotion on her face. She was good, better than I had given her credit for, but she wasn't perfect. Her jaw was tight, her breath just a little too controlled. She glanced up at me, her smile forced, like she was testing the waters. Something wrong? I asked again, my tone smooth, patient. She hesitated. Just for a second. Then she exhaled, relaxing her shoulders. No. Just a work thing. Work thing. I had to stop myself from smirking. She still thought she could play this game. She had no idea she had already lost. She tried to move past it, but I saw the way her fingers lingered on her phone, the way her mind wasn't really with me anymore. I had planted the seed. And now, I was going to watch it grow. Dinner continued as if nothing had changed. I kept the conversation light, asked about her day, pretended to listen as she spun her web of lies. I let her think she was in control, let her think she had everything handled. But her mind was elsewhere. I could see it in the way she checked her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. The way she barely touched her food. The way she was too careful, like she was trying to keep her expression neutral. She was wondering if Nathan had sent that text. If he had made a mistake. If he had somehow exposed them. And she couldn't ask him, not without raising suspicion. She was trapped in her own paranoia now. I had only nudged her in the right direction. After dinner, I leaned back in my chair, watching her closely. You okay? Sandra blinked, as if pulled from deep thought. She forced another smile. Yeah. Just tired. Long day? She nodded, swirling her wine absent-mindedly. Yeah, a lot of meetings. A lot of meetings. A lot of him. I wanted to laugh. Instead, I reached across the table, brushing my fingers against hers. You sure? You seem a little distracted. She hesitated. Then, for the first time, she lied badly. Just stressed about work. She said quickly, too quickly. Deadlines are piling up. I tilted my head, watching her carefully. Maybe you need a break. We should take a trip. Just the two of us. Her breath caught. She hadn't expected that. Her lips parted slightly, her fingers tightening around her glass. For a brief moment, I wondered if she would confess right then, if she would break down, admit everything, beg for forgiveness. But she didn't. She recovered quickly, forcing a small laugh. That sounds amazing. Maybe next month, after everything settles down. Another lie. She was still playing her game. But I wasn't playing any more. I let her think the night was normal. We cleaned up together, she kissed me before heading upstairs, and I waited. I gave her time. Time to sit with her thoughts. Time to let the paranoia fester. Then I made my next move. I went into my office and opened my laptop. With a few keystrokes, I accessed her phone's microphone, activating the listening feed. Her voice came through, hushed, anxious. Hey, are you there? She whispered. Nathan's voice came next, groggy, irritated. Yeah, what's wrong? She hesitated. Did you text me earlier? A pause. Then, what? No. Why? Sandra swallowed audibly. I got a weird message. I thought maybe you sent it by mistake. Nathan exhaled sharply. I didn't text you, Sandra. What did it say? Another pause. Then, never mind. It's nothing. Nothing. She was already doubting herself. Already spiraling. And it was only going to get worse. I let her sleep that night, but I knew she wouldn't rest. She was too wound up, her mind running in circles. By morning, I saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the way she lingered in bed, staring at her phone. She was waiting for another text, another clue. But I gave her nothing. Instead, I acted completely normal. I made coffee, kissed her like always, let her think everything was fine. Let her wonder. Let her question. Then, just as she was leaving, I made my next move. I stepped close, brushing her hair back, my lips near her ear. "Have a good day at work," I murmured. Sandra smiled. "You too." I held her gaze a little too long. Just enough to make her wonder. Then I let her go. I followed as she left. As expected, she didn't go to work. She went to him. I watched from a distance as she parked, stepping into his building like she belonged there. Like she wasn't a married woman. Like she wasn't coming home to me. But tonight would be different. Tonight, she would come home to something else entirely. I waited until they were inside before I moved. I had already studied Nathan's security system. It wasn't complicated, standard digital locks, minimal camera coverage. A joke, really. I had gotten into worse places before. This was nothing. I took my time, slipping into the building with practiced ease. I had already acquired a maintenance uniform, just in case someone questioned me. But no one did. No one ever questions what they expect to see. I reached their floor, standing outside his door. I could hear them inside. Laughing. Talking. Like they weren't destroying my life piece by piece. Like they had no idea what was coming. I pulled out my phone, accessing the bug I had planted days ago. Their voices came through clearly. Sandra's voice was soft, almost hesitant. "I think Damon knows something." Nathan exhaled. "What makes you say that?" She hesitated. "He asked me to go on a trip with him. Out of nowhere. And then I got that text." Nathan scoffed. "It was probably nothing. You're overthinking." Sandra sighed. "Maybe." Another pause. Then she whispered, "But I don't know. Something feels different." I smiled. "Oh, sweetheart. You have no idea." I reached into my pocket, gripping the small USB drive that contained everything. Every text. Every phone call. Every time she had walked through this door. It was all on here. And by tonight she was going to see it for herself. No more lies. No more games. This was the beginning of the end. And I was going to enjoy every second of it. Sandra always thought she was in control. She thought she was careful, that she had covered her tracks, that I was too blind or too trusting to ever question her. But the cracks were already spreading. She was doubting herself now. And tonight, I was going to break her doubt. I arrived home before she did, as I always did. The house was quiet, empty. Everything looked exactly the same, but it wasn't. Not anymore. I sat at the dining table, the small USB drive sitting in the center like a loaded gun. Inside it was everything. Her texts, her calls, the security footage from Nathan's building. Her entire betrayal laid out in digital proof. She wouldn't be able to deny it. She wouldn't be able to twist the truth. She was about to watch her world collapse. I poured myself a drink, sat back, and waited. At 9:47 p.m., the front door unlocked. Sandra walked in, shaking off her coat, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She looked tired, distracted, still lost in her thoughts. She had no idea what she was walking into. "Hey," she called casually, setting down her purse. "Why are you up?" I took a slow sip of my drink before answering. "Couldn't sleep." She stretched, letting out a soft sigh. "Same. Long day." I smirked. "Yeah, I bet it was." She hesitated, just for a second. Then, she forced a small laugh. "Yeah, work was brutal." "Lies." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit." Sandra blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "Sit down." She hesitated again. She was trying to read me, trying to figure out what was happening. Then, she saw the USB drive. Her breath hitched. "What's that?" I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto hers. "Go on. Plug it in." She didn't move. She didn't even breathe. Sandra was a good liar, but she wasn't this good. The moment she saw that USB, the moment she realized what it could be, her entire body tensed. She knew. She knew what was coming. And she was terrified, For a moment she didn't move. Then, slowly, she walked to the laptop, her fingers trembling as she inserted the USB. The screen flickered to life. The first thing she saw was herself, walking into Nathan's apartment, smiling, laughing, pulling him into a kiss before the door even closed behind them. Sandra's entire body stiffened. I watched her face as she realized what she was looking at. It wasn't just texts. It wasn't just deleted messages or suspicious phone calls. It was footage. Undeniable. Unforgivable. I sat back, swirling my drink. Go on. Keep watching. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts. Her hands hovered over the laptop, but she didn't close it. She couldn't. She was frozen, caught in the horror of her own actions. Clip after clip played. Sandra meeting Nathan at the hotel. Sandra slipping into his car. Sandra laughing at dinner, looking at him the way she used to look at me. Then came the texts. I can't stop thinking about you. Every time I go home to him, I feel empty. I wish I could stay here forever. Sandra let out a sharp, broken breath. Her hands clutched the table like she needed to hold on to something, like she was seconds away from collapsing. I stayed silent, watching her crumble. I wanted her to sit in this moment. I wanted her to feel it. She had spent months living a double life, spinning her web of lies, acting like she was untouchable. Now, there was nowhere to hide. Minutes passed in silence. Then, slowly, Sandra turned to face me. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I tilted my head, waiting. Go on. Say something. She swallowed hard, her eyes glassy, her entire body trembling. Damon. I slammed my glass onto the table, making her flinch. Don't. My voice was low, steady. Deadly. Do not insult me with excuses. She recoiled, her breath hitching. I wasn't. You were. I snapped. You always have been. You've been lying for months, coming home to me with his hands still on your skin, crawling into my bed after spending the night in his. Sandra's lips quivered, but she stayed silent. Good. I leaned forward, my voice dropping lower. Tell me, Sandra, when you kissed me, did you ever think about this moment? Did you ever wonder what would happen if I found out? She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. Damon, please. Please what? I hissed. Please forget? Please pretend like it never happened? Her hands balled into fists. It wasn't supposed to. Wasn't supposed to what? I barked. Mean anything? Because from where I'm sitting, it sure looked like it meant everything. Sandra sobbed, covering her mouth with both hands. I stood, towering over her. You chose this, I said coldly. Every single time. You chose him. You chose to lie to me, to betray me, to destroy everything we built. And for what? She opened her mouth, but I shook my head. No. I don't want to hear it. I turned away, running a hand through my hair. My heart was pounding, my blood burning. I had thought I wanted this moment, to watch her suffer, to see her break under the weight of her own guilt. But now, standing here, I just felt empty. Sandra tried to reach for me. Damon, please, we can fix this. I laughed. A dark, bitter laugh. Fix this? I echoed. Sandra, this isn't something you fix. She sobbed harder, shaking her head. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did. I cut her off sharply. Every single time. Every time you lied. Every time you chose him over me. She fell silent, staring at the floor. I exhaled slowly. My fists clenched at my sides. Then, finally, I spoke the words I had been holding back. I want a divorce. Sandra gasped. No. No, Damon, please. I stepped back. This marriage is over. She lunged for me, gripping my arms. We can fix this, I swear. It was a mistake, I ripped my arms away from her grasp. Stop lying, I snarled. You made your choice. Now live with it. Sandra sobbed uncontrollably, her entire body shaking. But I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. I grabbed my jacket, stepping toward the door. She reached for me again. Damon, please don't walk away. I turned, my gaze cold and final. You walked away first. And with that I walked out of that house and never looked back. Not at first. The moment I stepped outside, the cold night air hit me like a slap, clearing the last traces of her scent from my skin. I inhaled deeply, closing my eyes for just a second, steadying myself. Sandra was still inside, crying, begging, pleading. But it was too late. She had already burned everything. And now, I was the one standing in the wreckage, deciding what to do with the ashes. I drove with no destination, letting the road unfold ahead of me, the streetlights blurring as I replayed everything in my mind. The footage. The texts. The lies. Sandra's face when she realized she was caught. Her trembling voice, whispering my name like it still meant something. The way she reached for me, desperate, as if she could pull me back into the illusion she had so carefully built. I gripped the wheel tighter, my knuckles going white. The truth was, I had already been gone long before I walked out that door. I just hadn't realized it yet. At some point, I ended up at a hotel. A cheap one, nothing fancy, just a place where the walls didn't hold memories of her. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone, at the messages, at the proof of Sandra's betrayal. I had everything I needed. The divorce papers were already prepared. I had reached out to a lawyer the moment I suspected her. It had been a contingency plan, something I never thought I would have to use. But now it was a weapon. I drafted the email, attached the files, and sent it. By morning, Sandra would wake up to find her perfect little life dismantled. By the end of the week, she would be served. By the end of the month, she would have nothing. The calls started at sunrise. First 1. Then 2. Then 5. By the 10th missed call, I finally picked up. Sandra's voice was raw, broken. Damon! Don't, I said flatly. This is done. Please, she sobbed. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. I love you. You have to know that. I laughed, cold and sharp. No, Sandra. You don't get to decide what I know anymore. Damon, please. Just come home. We can talk. We can figure this out. I could almost picture her, sitting in our empty house, mascara streaked down her cheeks, clutching her phone like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. She had spent months slipping away, one lie at a time. And now, she was the one feeling abandoned. Good. You walked away first, I reminded her. This is just me catching up. She sobbed harder, but I didn't stay on the line to listen. I hung up. Sandra tried everything. She sent texts, emails, even letters, as if writing her apologies in ink would erase what she had done. I ignored them all. Then she tried him. Nathan. I wasn't surprised. I had broken her life apart. Of course, she would go to the one person who still made her feel wanted. But that didn't last long either. Because I had already made sure he had something to lose. Nathan had a job at a high-end firm, the kind that didn't tolerate extracurricular activities, with married clients. An anonymous tip. A few forwarded emails. And suddenly, Nathan's career was over. Sandra called me in a rage after that, her voice filled with venom. You destroyed him, she shrieked. He lost everything because of you. I leaned back in my chair, completely unmoved. Funny. That's exactly what you did to me. Her breath hitched. Damon, I didn't want this. But you chose it. I cut her off. Now live with it. The divorce went through quickly. I didn't fight her for the house. I didn't want it. She could sit in it, alone, surrounded by the ghosts of everything she had destroyed. I took the business, the assets that mattered. She got scraps. By the time the paperwork was finalized, she looked like a hollowed-out version of the woman I once loved. I saw her one last time, in the lawyer's office, as she signed the final page. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were rimmed red. She stared at me, searching my face for something, mercy, forgiveness, anything that would let her believe she hadn't lost everything. But I had nothing left for her. No love. No hatred. No anger. Just indifference. She whispered, "I miss you." I met her gaze, my expression unreadable. "I don't." And then, just like that, it was over. People think endings are loud, explosive. But sometimes they're just silent. A signature on a page. A final glance. A door closing behind you. Sandra had spent months living a lie, thinking she could have everything, me, Nathan, the thrill of deception without the consequences. She had been so sure she could juggle both worlds. But in the end, she was left with nothing. And me? I walked away. Not because I forgave her. Not because I wanted to forget. But because I refused to let her ruin me the way she had ruined herself. Some people drown in their mistakes. Others learn how to swim. And I let the storm take her. And I never looked back. The end.